For this task, all we have to do is to run tests on our endpoints that we have made earlier. And the code for this is the same as that of 6.1p, but still let us try to break down the code again. Herein the explanation of user model CS. So this class represents the user model. It contains properties for user data such as ID, email, first name, last name, password, hash, description, role, and the modified and created dates. Additionally, it includes methods to interact with the user data in the database. Now the getAllUsers method retrieves all users from the database. The getUser by ID retrieves a specific user by their ID from the database. The addUser adds a new user to the database. So similarly, the updateUser will update the user. DeleteUser will delete a user from the database by their ID. And lastly, the updateUser credentials will update the user credentials such as email ID and password in the database. Now if we move to users.controller.cs, then we have an endpoint named as API user. So herein getAllUser is used as a get request to retrieve all users. The getUser by ID is used to retrieve user by their ID. The addUser model is a post request to add a new user. The updateUser is a put request to update an existing user. The deleteUser deletes a user to delete a user by their ID. Now updateUser credentials is just a put request to update user credentials. Now if we move to mapcontrollers.cs, then this controller handles HTTP requests related to maps. So getAllMaps, this will retrieve the get request to get all maps. The getSquareMaps will be using to retrieve the maps that are square. Similarly, getMapById will get request to retrieve a map by its ID, suppose 1 or 2, etc. Similarly, addMap will is basically a post request to add a new map. In the same manner, the updateMap is used as a put request to update an existing map, and deleteMap is a request to delete a map by its ID. Now if we move to robotcommands.controllers.cs, then here in get all robot commands, this get request is used to retrieve all robot commands. The get move commands is used to move the robot. The get robot command by ID, this get request will use to retrieve a robot command by its ID only. Similarly, the add, update and delete commands will be used. Now for robot command access.cs. Here we have a namespace called robot controller API.persistence, and we have classes such as robot command data access, in which we are having methods. Firstly, the get robot command method, it will retrieve all robot commands from the database. Secondly, the get robot command by ID will retrieve a robot command by its ID, as we have discussed earlier. Now in the mapdata.access file, in this we are having methods such as getAllMaps, getSquareMaps, getMapById, addMap, updateMap. These are similar commands which are used to update the map function. Suppose getSquareMap retrieves square maps from the database, and addMap add a new map to the database. Similarly, the check coordinates int id, int x, int y, it will check if your coordinate belongs to a specific map or not. Next we have is the userdata.access.cs. In this we are having methods such as getAllUsers, getUser by ID, addUser, updateUser, deleteUser and updateUser credentials. These are all similar. So let's move on to the program CS file and see what is happening there. In this program file, It configures services such as controllers, API Explorer, endpoint, and Swagger documentation generation. Now, basic authentication is added using a custom basic authentication handler. Herein, authorization policies are defined, including admin only and user only. Now, Swagger documentation is configured with a custom description and contact information. The HTTP request pipeline is configured based on this environment. Also, the static files and HTTP redirection are also enabled, so that authentication and authorization middleware are added up. Now, to check if it's running and is currently being authenticated, we'll have to move to Postman app. Hello everyone. Today we'll be discussing the output of 7.1p task. Now, this task is all about the testing of the endpoints on the Postman app, as Postman provides testing feature to display the test results such as pass or fail. In this task, we were provided with the testing script of some endpoints in the example section, and of some we have made it by own. Now, firstly we have the get robot commands test script. Here, in this script, we have conducted a series of tests to ensure the integrity and correctness of the response. Firstly, it will verify the status code of the response if it is OK to confirm the execution of the request. Then it checks that the response body is not empty and is in valid JSON format. Also, it confirms that the JSON response in an array containing robot commands. Finally, it inspects each command within an array to ensure it possesses the essential properties such as ID, name, and description. Now, lastly, this is a comprehensive testing regimen that ensures that the API endpoint reliably runs and returns the expected data structure, maintaining the quality and consistency of the service. Now, if we move to get move commands, then it also checks the Postman script to verify the response from the API endpoint. Firstly, it checks the status code that is OK, and if it is OK, the request means it is successful. Then it confirms that the response body is not empty and it's in parent JSON format. Following that, it ensures that the JSON response contains an array of move commands by iterating over each command and checking if the isMove command property is true or not. This property is presumably used to differentiate between move commands and the other type of commands. Overall, the script ensures that the API endpoint responds with the expected status codes only. And for that, we can see in the test results, as the status code is OK, response body is not empty, and the response body contains an array of move commands. Next, we'll move on to get ID. So here, firstly it will check the status code of the script. Then it will verify the response body if it contains the properties such as ID, name, and description. And if it does so, by using the pm.expect function to assert that the JSON response has these properties. Also, the script will verify that the response body contains the expected properties such as name and description by accessing the JSON response object only. Now let's move on to the post command. Here, in the test part, the script is used to validate the response from an API endpoint. Firstly, it will ensure that the status code of the response is 201, indicating a successful creation of an resource. Then it will check if the response body is not empty, ensuring that it contains something. Finally, it will verify that the response body contains the specific properties such as ID, name, and description by accessing the JSON response object. This series of tests confirm that the integrity of the API response, ensuring it meets the expected standards. Now if we move on to the put modify endpoint, here we have the script. It is a simple script that validates the response from an API endpoint. It checks if the status code of the response is 204, that is no content. The status code is typically used to indicate a successful request that doesn't return any content in the response body. So this test ensures that the request was successful, but there is no content in return. So as in the test result, we can only see that the status code is no content. Nextly, we have the delete request. Here, this status code specifies that the request was successful. Currently, it is 404 as I am not deleting any command. But when I will delete any command, the status code will change to 204, and no content will be shown up as the command is being deleted. This test will ensure that the server correctly handles requests that do not require a response body. Next we have is the get map request. Now, this script will send a request to retrieve all maps from an API endpoint. It then checks the response to ensure it meets certain criteria. Firstly, it verifies the status code, which is 200 OK. Now, indicating it nextly confirms the status response body if it is not empty and is in JSON format only. Finally, it will check that the response contains an array of maps or not. These testing will help us ensure that the API endpoint is functioning correctly and returns the expected data. For the next command, we'll move on to get square. Now, this script sends a request to retrieve square maps from an API endpoint. It will then conduct tests on the response to ensure it meets certain criteria. It will verify the status code firstly, that is 200 OK, which is indicating success. Next, it will confirm that the response body is not empty and is in JSON format. Finally, it will check that the response contains an array of maps. These tests help to ensure that the API endpoint is functioning correctly and returning the expected data. Now we have the get endpoint by ID. So here in the test script is used to get a map by its ID. It will check the response to ensure it meets the criteria, first by receiving the status code, that is 200 OK. Then it will confirm that the response body is not empty and is in JSON format, and will check that the response contains properties of maps such as ID, name, description, column, rows, created data and modified data. Now data here is date only. So these tests will ensure that the API endpoint is functioning correctly and returning the expected map data. Next we'll move on to post maps post. Now here as you can see, the test results are status code is created and response body is not emptied only. So it uses the post method to send the request and provides details such as the map name, description, columns and number of rows and creation of modified dates. These details are sent in JSON format as the request body. After sending the request, the script checks the response body to ensure it meets certain criteria by firstly checking the response code. Next, it confirms that the response body is not empty and is in a JSON format. Next, we have the put command. Now, it will use a put method to send the request and provide updated details such as the map, name, description, number of columns and number of rows. These details are sent in JSON format as the requested body. After sending the request, the script will check the response to ensure it meets certain criteria. Firstly, by checking the response code, that is 204, indicating that the update was successful and there is no content to return. This ensures that the map has been updated as expected. Next we have is the delete command. It will certainly delete the entry by its ID. So that is same. And lastly we have the change command. Now this script will send a request to check a coordinate on a map specified by the map ID and the X and Y coordinates. It uses the get method to send the request to the API endpoint. After sending the request, the script will check the response to ensure it meets certain criteria or not. Firstly, it will verify that the status code of the response is 200, indicating a successful request. Next, it will confirm that the response body is not empty and is in JSON format. Finally, it will check that the response body contains a boolean value indicating whether the coordinates exist on the map or not. These tests ensure that the API endpoint is functioning correctly and provides the expected result regarding the specified coordinate on the map. Now currently it is false, as it means that this and X and Y coordinate are not totally covered by the robot till now. Now we can change this to update the status of the robot, and we can change that to true as well, but currently as of now it is false. So this was all about the output explanation for the 7.1p task.